it's like, oh, it's like in that movie Bug's Life. At the opening scene, a twig falls. They're all in line. The ants are all in line. The twig falls, and they panic because they don't know what to do because there's a twig in front of them. And one of the old guys comes and says, "Okay, now we're gonna walk around the twig. We're gonna walk around the twig. We're gonna do that." And I always feel like that. In the way we do our EC stuff, elastic communicator stuff, we're always saying, okay, we're going to handle that problem. We're going to handle that problem, but we're going to store this in a way that somebody can get in there with an app and say, you want to redo this pick. You're not just like fishing stuff out of the GTP to figure out what to do next.
So we're in the midst of a significant investment to improve our user experience, with the goal to be really the industry-leading user experience in our space. So talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I can kick off a little bit just because it's such a big business problem, right? When you look at it, all of our customers, one of the common themes are, I can't find enough people, I can't enable enough people to work in my operation, I can't retain them. So training and productivity are always top of mind, right? Yeah. So it's kind of and there's multiple audiences, right? Yeah, so when you talk about UI UX, you have kind of the floor operation, then you have all the administrative back office stuff, and there's different requirements for each.
Yeah, I think on the floor side. So when we started this idea of creating the Elastic UI, which we call our composable UI, about 2015, and we would get these, the first thing that the folks on the floor ops said is, look, we want to have an app style approach that people can fairly easily understand, right? So that was item number one, just make the app easier. But then as we got those things out there, we said, the other thing that people have a problem with, and when we bring people in, we may not have them for more than 9 months, hopefully we do, but we have them for a short period of time, is just navigating the operation, right? Because a lot of the apps will just come and say, go to CP 3264.7, right? And so an operator who starts just today is like, okay, what the heck does that mean to me? And where is that? And so for instance, what we've been doing is saying, okay, let's put navigation tips on there. Say you're changing aisle, and the next version of this will actually potentially have a course that we can show, right? Because of our composable UI, we can insert, different elements in there as we see fit. So it could show, hey, you're in this spot, and then now you're navigating here. Right now it shows, hey, you're changing aisles, and you're going 2 aisles over, or you might be going 2 bays over. So those sort of navigation tips really are the next level of what we're doing, because having I think Gartner calls it a consumer style app for the floor, that's something that we've had for a while. Now we're sort of to the next level of saying, okay, how can we enable them more to be more effective, less frustration? People just want to feel like they're winning, right? And being frustrated about moving on the floor really is something we're trying to deal with, and making people feel like they're just being more successful, and really are, because they can be more successful out of the kind of out of the gate with that kind of approach, right?
Yeah, and I think that dynamic holds both for kind of the floor audience and the back office audience. I think it's a different challenge. When I think about floor operations and people on the floor, it is really a step-by-step. It's a sequence. It's a prompt through. It's I was laughing because I fly a lot, and you fly a lot, we fly a lot, and you have the big red airline app, and you got the big blue airline app, and I flew a lot on big red, and now I've been flying more on big blue, and their apps and their sequence of where you find your boarding pass and how you check in and how you see what the next leg of your flight is, it's completely different. And it drives me a little crazy. And I'm a technically savvy person, where I'm in the blue app and I'm going, why can't I find this piece? Mm-hmm. You came from blue, so you're like, I get it.
Yeah, you're an idiot.
Yeah, and you're an idiot. Yeah, go on the red app. You'll be like, I'm lost. So it's that kind of, your brain gets wired for a sequence, and we have that philosophy with floor operations. And then I think when you get over to the back office, it's really about having maybe a little bit more conversation, right? Yeah. And bringing in some agentic pieces to say, here, I'm going to help you, waving and do a co-pilot. And
Yeah, you know what's funny about the back office is that so when certain vendors like switch, they're gonna switch to from a really powerful purpose-built kind of application more toward a web-based, and they get their UI UX people in there, and they have all this theoretical UI UX stuff and make something that is a very nice web application, but a really stinky operational application, right? And so it's funny because, when we have this conversation with the UI designers and things like that, we're always sort of finding that area to say, look, yes, I get what you're saying from a UI UX perspective, but let's just take a second and stand back away from this app about 3 or 4 feet, because this is how people are working out on the floor, right? And saying, if this display is sitting, out on the floor and somebody needs access to it and they want to see it, or if they're in the back office, right? Do they have access to all the controls? They don't have to go click down, click down, click down, do all these things that a normal web app would have you do, right? That does not make it a great operational app, right? So we're finding, luckily, what in our world, we came from, we're web first. We're the first one on the cloud. We're the first one to the web. So we don't have this big discontinuity between sort of, an old style thick client to this web app. So since I got here 2 years ago, we've been doing this nice progression, and now we're just accelerating that. We're not creating big discontinuities. We're just making really nice improvements. Like, we in our latest one, the different sort of functional areas all show their own custom metrics on display with different graphics. So you can bypass that page, but by default they're there, and you can then, if you click on one, it goes right to the operation that's sort of talking about. And then the next level is going to be even more on the back office side, and on the floor users, it's much more of an app sort of approach, right, where it feels just like an app.
Yep. But I think you made a great point there. Well, you made a lot of great points. The one point that is really key is Softeon went to the web very early. So where a lot of competitors are coming off of a thick client and they go to the web, and it takes your time. You have to go through that process as a product management organization, as a development organization, to understand the different kind of approach that you have to take. You got to learn it, just like anybody. And we were fortunate because we came in and we were already at a great starting point to just launch and start.
It was phenomenal, right? Because we did have, when you go from a thick client, and just our experience working with vendors that are in thick client, we just helped one of our customers with a go live last year about that, is that they're still using pieces of that thick client because they haven't gotten all the way moved over to the web. But even the folks that say they're cloud centric or cloud first or whatever, a lot of times what they'll do is they'll make the mistake of saying, let's get a UI UX person in there and have this really theoretically awesome UI UX, and it stinks for the guys in the back office, because they don't want to be clicking around. They just want to get to the order. They want to escalate the priority. They don't want to go through a bunch of links and do that. And so it's funny because we have this conversation all the time, is finding that balance between, I get what you want to do, UI UX design, but put yourself in the mode of a person that just wants to escalate the priority of this order. They want to do it fast because they got a million things going on. Let's get to the business of that and get on with it, and not, it's got to do this, all this jazz. And so it's funny. It's just it's a great set of conversation to have.
Yeah, it's very true. An easy illustration is, if I'm doing problem resolution, right? I go to a hospital lane. I got a carton. Why is this carton here? If I'm on a back office, if I've got a full screen, and I can scan in that carton, and I could bring up all kinds of data. But you don't want to do that out in the operation. Really, you're doing scan the carton. So, let me check this piece of data. Is the lane full? Is there a photo eye? You're taking them through a sequence where you're just prompting somebody through the sequence, and then you give them the resolution. Put this back onto this induction point, or
absolutely.
reprint the label, or whatever it needs to be done. And that's a very different, it's two different worlds.
Yeah, that I'm a box, what's my problem sort of app is something that we, in our composable UI, we always do that because somebody looks and says, what the heck is this box doing here? And they scan it and like, yeah, where am I supposed to be and what am I doing here, right? But your point about the back office is so interesting because think about that, like we have all those great flows in the back office and now our ability to make those into more, an agent sort of flow and ask a question about that because we have all the abilities to do that, right? So ask a question about this order and get a response that says, hey, this order, is here because of this. So that's our next iteration of that UI, I think is, we're really working on the UI UX side, but we're also working on different ideas around like, starting points of like, just ask a question, just start with asking a question, right? And, especially on the technical side, just say, hey, I want to do this integration. What do I need to do? Give me an example of their format and it'll tell you the rest, right? I'm trying to think about, how escalate, you should be able to say, hey, escalate the priority of this order, right? So I think that's from a UX perspective, that sort of input and response sort of thing is going to be the next generation of where we're going with things. So
yeah. And before we like jump, completely out of the whole UI UX, I think you talked on you made the term up, the composable UI, or you use that term. And one of the things that I always try to talk about is the gap in UI experience when we're doing automation on the floor and integration. So you've got a dense storage, or you got a dance floor with robotic picking, and you're bringing them to a packing area. When something goes wrong, I think people aren't really thinking about the problem cases and how those get resolved. It's like, oh, I can't pick this product. I just say I can't pick it. Well, really what you want to do is at that pack station now, you want to have some kind of collaborative interaction with the person, and then back to the equipment of, can I try to do a replacement pick? Do I, send the order short? Do I do a pick from a different reserve location, bring it over to pack, right? Because that has really been non-existent up to this point.
Oh, it's worse than that. I mean, a lot of the vendors, the WCS and some of them called the WES vendors who do PTL and goods to person and things like that, absolutely stink at that. I mean, it's like, it's like in that movie Bug's Life. At the opening scene, a twig falls. They're all in line. The ants are all in line. The twig falls, and they panic because they don't know what to do because there's a twig in front of them. And one of the old guys comes in and says, "Okay, now we're going to walk around the twig. We're going to walk around the twig. We're going to do that." And I always feel like that, in the way we do our EC stuff, elastic communicator stuff, we're always saying, "Okay, we're going to handle that problem. We're going to handle that problem, but we're going to store this in a way that somebody can get in there with an app and say, you want to redo this pick. You're not just like fishing stuff out of the GTP to figure out what to do next." And so you're right. I mean, that's a real life thing that needs to be handled better. We're taking some of that responsibility, but some of it's like some of those guys are still like, they are the ant that the twig falls, and they're like, I don't know what to do.
Right, and if two twigs fall, then they just shut it down.
They shut it
like
down.
There's like, okay, we're going to stop picking.
Yeah. All the shoots are down.
Yeah, so it's a huge concern, and it's something we're focused on because it's only a small percentage, right?
Yeah,
in the end, you have whatever it is, 0.1% of inability to pick, mispick, whatever it is. It's the bins askew, but what it turns into is service level failures. Potentially, you're short shipping, you're doing something, and by having composable UI and having that integration philosophy with the automation, we can reduce or eliminate those service failures.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It is a small percentage, but it's a large percentage of labor to resolve, right? It's a small percentage of physical operations, but it's, the time it takes somebody to do the research and blah, blah, blah. It's like, that one thing might take somebody 10 or 15 minutes to try and resolve if they don't have the right tools, right? Or if the vendor doesn't, the GTP vendor doesn't have a good solution for that, right? And you got to go and you got to fake pick it. I mean, this is my favorite. This is the my pet peeve about this, my favorite thing to point out, because it's like, I don't like doing fake things like in a warehouse. You shouldn't have to do, I'm going to do this fake pick because we got to tell the GTP that we did this thing because it, or, do this, like that's crazy. This is not like 1986 anymore, where, so yeah, I think you're right about that. It's we want to be better at that. I think we want to coax the industry into being better at that, and minimizing the amount of, because if you think about like all the agents and things like that, we are going to be managing more by exceptions, right? And so we need to be better at handling the exceptions.
Yep, very true.
Yeah, when it comes to UX, I'm always reminded of the quote, the illusion of simplicity is complex kind of thing. And I think the one thing that comes through loud and clear when I hear you guys talk is that kind of breaks through that complexity is empathy, right? You've been in people's shoes, you've been on floors, you've been in all kinds of facilities and know, the headaches that you could tell. So just a comment maybe just on, the importance of building a world-class UI UX with the knowledge you have.
Yeah, I think that, Jim and I we're like, very ops-centric people. We've made our living by running around the floor and doing stuff. And so we've gotten to know people on the floor. And I feel like beyond just feeling their pain, we've lived, as you said, we've lived that. And so we're super sensitive to that, and empathetic about it because, we've been on the floor and have that frustration about all I need to do is be able to figure out what this box is doing because it's holding the rest of my shipment up. Because at the end of the day, right, you could be holding a whole trailer up because one box has a problem, right? And so that frustration, that, histrionics about, hey, we got to get the ship by midnight because it's got to be in today's shipment. So all of those things are things that we're aware of and we've lived, and, I think we get that, right?
Yeah, I think we do because of our background and the history and running around warehouses and, doing the picking, doing the packing. And I think it's one of the things that we've helped really bring Softeon forward on, which is really bringing a lot of resources, both from overseas or the group here, and injecting more energy into being in the operation, understand the operation. I always talk about it as, your key role is to understand operations. What are they really doing from a warehouse manager perspective? If you don't understand what they're trying to accomplish, you don't really solve it. You got to understand our solution because functionally you're trying to bridge the two. And then the third thing is you got to be able to really communicate and manage, with customers. And that's been a big focus for the last couple of years, is to put people on rotation and get them those, dog years. We always say a week in an implementation out on the floor is like 2 months worth of training you could ever have. It's like dog years. So we're very focused on that.
Yeah, and it's funny because, in my previous life doing implementations for other WMS vendors, it was so funny because the WMS vendors would send people on site and they would be in the conference room, the war room or whatever, with all the snacks and everything and the coffee, which I'm all about the coffee. But and I would be saying, okay, we're going out to the floor. And then the WMS vendor goes, no, they bring their questions into us. And I'm like, okay, no, our guys you can come with us, but our guys are going to the floor. And the first thing you do is you go out to the floor and you see, hey, why is that IO vehicle like wandering around the receiving area? IO vehicles should be in the aisle, not wandering. Oh, we probably have a configuration. I mean, you don't, if you're not out there doing it, you don't see those things. Like somebody will eventually complain. But if you go out there and see an aisle vehicle, a $60,000 aisle vehicle wandering on receiving is not optimal, right? So you can tell that, right? And so, being out there on the floor, seeing those things and seeing the number of boxes that are going down hospital, right? And you're like, wow, that's bad. There's a barcode problem, right? Seeing that kind of stuff, right? I mean, you got to be out there doing it to see
where the action is. You got to be on the floor.
Yeah. So, we definitely take the approach of like, let's get ourselves out there.
Yep.
Do you have the scars?
Yes, we do.